Welcome, welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you. All right, let me do this. Okay, there we are. I have a picture for today. So beautiful passages. This particular part of Moses' speech is just starts, I think, with really a great statement to think about, right? And well, let's see how it goes. Banim atem Hashem Elokechem. You are sons to the Lord your God. So whether we look at Banim as just simply just the sons, or we see them as children, of course, that's the way I understand it. That we are referring to male and female, it doesn't really matter, because what's really of importance is the nature of the relationship, and to meditate on what it means to be a child of God. That's what we're being told, that we have a relationship of children to our divine creator. And what's that relationship, right? Is it a love? Just what does a parent do for a child? What does a good parent do for a child to raise them uh, so that they have, we hope, a lovely, um, good life, good life. So, Lord Titko to do. So the first thing it says is because of this, right? This is the rationale. Lord Titko to do, you shall not cut yourselves. Velo tasimu korcha bein einechem lamet, nor shall you make a bald spot between your eyes for the dead. In other words, to express mourning in such a way that you mutilate yourself. And this, of course, raises, I think, a really existential question, which, if we thought this through, I suspect, might influence many decisions that we make, especially regarding our bodies. And the question is, to whom does our body belong? And I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but at least I don't believe we own our bodies. We reside in them for a temporary period of time. But in some ways, our bodies are our responsibility. And if we do believe in a divine creator and recognize that the miracle of creation and the creative forces that surround us constantly give us our bodies, then maybe we would think differently about how we use them and how we treat them. But at least it's saying for Jews, for Israelites, they should not be mutilating themselves to express their grief over the dead. And I can't help thinking about the fact that I just recently finished up reading Hawaii by James Michener, and their practice was indeed to do various acts to express grief that were of major mutilation, like knocking out their front teeth, blinding one of their eyes, doing all kinds of things to express their grief. And of course, we're dealing, I think, very with deep psychological issues of how we confront our mortality and the practices that we have in order to somehow uh, relate to this fact that we are mortal. But here we have an explicit statement. And of course, the implication is that people were doing this kind of thing. So that's why the Torah is telling us not to do it. And again, underlining that subtext of the Torah, doing what doesn't come naturally. Rashi, lo titkodedu, lo titnu gdida veseret livsarchem. You shall not make a cut or a wound in your flesh, almate, for the dead, to express grief. Kederech sheha'omoriyim osim, just as the Amorites practice. Lefi she'atim, why not? She'atim banav, because you are sons, shel makom, of the Holy One. Va'atim ru'im, and it is appropriate for you, liyot na'im, to present yourself as handsome or becoming or beautiful, velo gedudim, and not cut up umekorchim or mekurachim, and bald, ripping off your hair. So that's an interesting thought, that I think human dignity is a very important issue, and the fact that in some ways what Rashi is adding here, that we should look at ourselves as requiring that level of dignity because of this relationship that we have with God. Bein einechem, between your eyes. So what do we mean by between your eyes? Etzel hapadachat. We're talking about the hair right above the forehead. Uvamakom acher, and in another place, Omer, this is in Leviticus, it states, Lo yekruchu korcha berosham. They should not make a bald spot in their heads. La'asot kol harosh kevein ha'inayim. In other words, now it could mean two things. One is that it could mean that the halacha that is mentioned here applies to the entire head, or it could mean to make your head, the top of your head, look like the area between your, and your forehead, that it should cut it off. It could mean that too. So, and going on to say, Moses is giving additional rationale. Ki am kadosh ata. For you are, of course, we translate kadosh as holy, but the nature of holiness means, distinguished. It means unique, has that sense of unique. And I love to understand it also as significant, right? Standing out, having significance. Lashem Elokecha, to the Lord your God. Uvecha, and in you, Bachar Hashem, the Lord has chosen, Liot lo la'am skula, to be for him a treasured people. Mikol hamim, from all the other nations, asher al pnei ha'adamah, which are on the face of the earth. So certainly we have here an explicit statement regarding chosenness. And to what degree this bears itself out, I guess is a matter of opinion, but certainly it is interesting in terms of historically how that's played out. Ki am kadoshata, for you are a holy, a sacred people. Kedushat atzmacha, your sanctity, me avotecha, is from your ancestors, right? You derive your sanctity from your ancestors, your forefathers. V'od b'cha Hashem, and not only that, but that God has chosen you, And my understanding really of this statement is a sense of noblesse oblige, a sense of responsibility. That there's, I think sometimes they used to say, right, we answer to our higher authority. And that there's a real necessity, that part of the very essence of being a member of the Jewish people has to do with this sense of noblesse oblige. So I know a lot more can be said, but at least some thoughts about it. Lo tochal, now we're going to get into kashrut. Goes along with it. Look at the connection. That what you eat, because I suspect maybe it has to do with the fact that quite literally, not just metaphorically, we are what we eat. And that there's something to be said about that. Although there's also the notion of the discipline, even if we see this as purely arbitrary, but as something that defines a loving act, that when you do something for someone else, because you know they want you to do it, it is one very essential way of expressing love. And since we're commanded to love God, that this is in fact one of the ways in which we express in reality our love of God. But there may well be other implications to this particular diet that we don't even know about. So, lo tochal kol to'eva. You should not eat anything repulsive. Right? We have this word to'eva in various contexts. But I think one way, of course, which would go along with this is the word disgusting. Disgusting. So there are things, of course, the human psyche is so interesting because there's a certain fascination with things that are disgusting. And sometimes things that are disgusting can be very desirable. It's just how complicated we are. So anyway, kol toeva, right? So this is in Tractate Bechorot, page 34. Kol sheta'avti lacha, right? Anything that I have declared forbidden to you, right? That I've said, this is repulsive. You should stay away from this. Kagon, for example, so he gives a different example here. Saram ozen bechor. So in other words, this is someone who, there's this law that the firstborn of the flock is something that is to be dedicated to God. But we know also, it says that if for some reason this particular animal is blemished, and the definition of blemished is discussed in the halacha, right? That it does not get dedicated, but can be treated as chulin meat, as meat that is not dedicated. So here someone went and intentionally cut the ear, because that's one of the blemishes, cut the ear, or not off, but cut it, sliced it, bechor, of the firstborn, kedei leshochto b'medina. So basically, this is saying so that he can slaughter it out in the provinces, meaning outside the temple. He does not have to treat it as a regular bechor, just so that he himself can benefit from this animal. Hare davar sheta'avti lacha. So he's saying it's an interesting way of understanding, right? Kol mum the yebo, right? I have told you, right? It is something that I have informed you is something that is repulsive, that it should not have any blemish in it. And in other words, you've gone and put a blemish in it, right? You should not be doing that, right? Uva lamed kan, and here we learn out in this context, shelo yishchot, that he should not slaughter it, v'yochal al oto hamum, that this is not one now on that particular blemish. He has no right to slaughter it, to practice shchita, excuse me, and then consume the animal. Okay. Now, here we go, right? Bishel basar b'chalav. So the idea of boiling meat in milk. Hare davar sheta'avti lacha. I have considered that repulsive. I have declared that as repulsive to you. He's here kan al achilato. So here, because it just says, do not seethe the kid in its mother's milk, it doesn't say anything about consuming it. It just says you can't do that. But in the same kind of way now, right? We now know, just as he wasn't to eat that before, you're not to eat food in milk with meat. So this is where we actually get the mitzvah of not consuming it. Yo tochal, you shall not consume, you shall not eat. Now, Zot habeima asher tochelu. These are the animals that you may consume, you may eat. Shor, an ox. Se ksavim, right? A sheep from the flock. The se izim, and the goats of the flock. Rashi. Zot habema. These are the animals that you may consume. And it goes on to mention other things. So I'm wondering if we should go on to the next sentence as well. So ayil, a deer, utzvi, a gazelle, the yachmur, roebuck. I needed in some cases to simply look up the translation because these are names of animals and there are traditions. The Talmud goes into discussing what animals is the Bible talking about here. V'ako, the wild goat, v'dishon, the ibex, uta'o, and an antelope, v'zamer, and a mountain sheep. So let's go ahead with this. Okay, so ayil, utzvi, v'yachmor. Lamadnu, so we learn out, and this is mentioned in the Sifrei and Chulin, she hachaya bichlal behema, that wild animals are included in this concept of behema. Normally, we think of behema as being domesticated animals. At least that's the way I've understood it. But now we need to understand behema as meaning any kind of animal. And the reason is, right, that because there are wild animals mentioned, and it refers to behema. Velamadnu, and we learn, again, this is mentioned specifically in the Tractate of Chulin, page 63, and the Tractate Chulin discusses the consumption of regular meat. Sheha behema v'chaya tame'ah, right? And we learn that animals and wild beasts that are impure, meruba min haTorah, are much more occur much more than pure ones. In other words, simply put, there are a lot more animals that are not kosher than animals that are kosher. Why? Shebechol makom, because in every instance, horet et hamuat, it specifies that which is the smaller amount. In other words, that it mentions specifically, if it's mentioning what animals are permissible, then the assumption is that all the other animals are not permissible, and there are a lot more animals that are not mentioned than are mentioned. What's interesting is that the reverse occurs with the birds, because with the birds, the Torah specifies birds that are forbidden, which would imply that more birds are permissible. It's just the opposite of what we're reading here. Going on. Va'ako, right? Metugam ya'ala. So the Aramaic translation of this is ya'ala. There's the word in the Onkelos, right? Let's find the place, right? And mentioned in Job 39, Ya'ale Selah, right? So meaning the buck of the stone, who literally translated as a Steinbock in the Old French, and in Yiddish, Steinbuck. Buck and Stein means a stone. And I'm going to show you the picture of it I found. Those are steenbocks. Those are known. They look like small, beautiful little deer. They're fairly diminutive. So there we are. You can see them. Beautiful eyelashes, right? Okay. So get back into our text. Sorry. It's fine. Well, see if I can. There we are. Okay. Can you see it, by the way? Can you see the text? Yes. Yes. All right. So that's a Steenbook. Uta O, right? And he says, tur bala, right? Tur is an Aramaic for ox. Shor in a shin in Hebrew often gets worked as a taf in Aramaic. V'chein piresh Rashi Eov Lametet. This is, as you can see, this is an editorial comment here. This is the way Rashi explains it in Job 39, and then Tractate Rosh Hashanah, page 26b. V'ein od, he says, look further by Rashi Chulin, in the Rashi on Chulin, page 59b. So Tur Hayar, meaning the ox of the forest. Okay. Ba'ala Ya'ar. Okay, so Ba'ala, Tur Bala, right? Ba'ala. Ya'ar means a forest, Belashon Arami in Aramaic. So we're listing now all these various animals. We'll keep going. V'chol behema mafreset parsa, right? And now we're getting down to a determining factors. V'chol behema, and any animal, mafreset parsa, which has true hoofs, okay? V'shosat shesa shtei parsot, and it is the two nails are completely split, or the two hoofs are completely split. Ma'alat, so that's one factor. Ma'alat geira bahema, and it also has to chew the cud. Literally, it means to bring up the cud. Ota tochelu, that you may eat. So there we have a more general statement as to what constitutes a kosher animal. It has to chew the cud and have split hoofs. Mafreset, stuka. So the word mafreset in Hebrew isn't so simple, but the word stuka, meaning split, it's a clearer word, and that's the he says, just as he translates it, as Onkelos translates it. Parsa, planta, or plant in French, and fus ala. Okay, fus ala, meaning hoofs. Beshosat, so chaluka bishte tzipornaim. That is, it's divided. The hoof is divided into two nails. Sheyesh stuka, okay, and one that is where the nails or the hoof is split. Ve'ene chaluka, but tzipornaim, but its nails aren't completely split. Vehit me'ah, that would still be considered impure. So just being split is not sufficient. The nails of the hoof have to be completely split. Bab hema, amongst animals, and again we're looking at chulin here, mashma, that implies, ma shenimtza b'behema achol. So it says that which is found within the animal you can consume, right? Because it says bab hema, in the animal. Although generally, grammatically would say among the animals. But we know that the word ba can also mean within, right? So that's what it's saying. This implies that something that is found within the animal you may consume as well. Mikan Amru, and from this they said, again in Chulin, Shehashvil Nitar, that the fetus of an animal is permissible. It is considered kosher by Shchitat Imo, in the Shchita, in the ritual slaughter of its mother. So obviously, because under normal circumstances, we require shchita in order to consume the meat of the animal, but it's saying in the case of a fetus that is in this animal, it doesn't require shchita to be kosher, and that's from this bab hema, right? So let's going on. Ach et ze lo tuchlu, but from these animals you shall not consume, mima'alei hageira, from those that chew the cud, umimafrisei haparsa hashsu'ah, and those that have split hoofs, et hagamal, the dromedary, ve'et ha'arnevet, the hare, ve'et ha'shafan, and the daemon, ki ma'aleh geira hema, because they chew the cud, ufarsa lo hifrisu, but they do not have split hoofs, or they do not have proper hoofs. Tmeim heim lachem, you need to consider them as impure. They are not appropriate for you to eat. So before I look at the Rashi, I have to say that I checked to see if rabbits, etc., chew the cud. They are not ruminants. They aren't. I mean, even though they eat grass, nevertheless, they don't have the various stomachs that a ruminant has. So exactly what it's talking about here and how they understand it, I'm not sure. Okay, because Hema is a plural, so it isn't, and Gamal earlier on is singular. So it appears to be referring to all these animals, but for whatever Arnevet and Shafan, which apparently are ruminants, I can't tell you. I cannot tell you. Clearly, we could not eat the hare or rabbits because they don't have hoofs at all. And possibly that's something that's implied here, but it says Male Gera, right? But possibly it does go along and say Ufrasa lo hifrisu. So maybe that's the fact that we need to understand, right? That the camel may well be a ruminant. I actually didn't think to check on a camel, but for sure it has both categories, and it may just be referring to the fact that its hoofs are not split. So let's see here. Do we have any Rashi? Yes, hashsu'ah, right? A split. Briyahi, okay, so referring now to the gamal. It is a creature, sheyesh lo shnei gabim. It has two humps, ushnei shidraot, and two backbones. Amru Rabotenu, and our rabbis said, Lama nishnu babhemot. Why are they being repeated? Why are these animals being repeated, mentioned here, right? And because they're also mentioned, of course, in Leviticus, and they say mipnei hashasu'ah, and they say because of this camel, this dromedary that is mentioned here is not mentioned in Leviticus. So since they're mentioning the dromedary, they're going to mention all the other animals mentioned there too. Uva ofot, and regarding repeating the names of the various birds, mipnei ha-ra'ah, there is a bird called a ra'ah, shelo nemru b'torat kohanim, because that is not mentioned in Leviticus. And this is where we're going to stop here today. And we'll hopefully pick it up next time. And I'm going to stop the share. All right. Any comments for the record?
Yeah, I do. If if your hair, God gave us the body to
Yes.
take care of.
Yes.
And we're in the image of God's. We're in the body of the image of God, so we have to take care of our body. So we do not destroy our body by cremation, because that destroys our body. We shouldn't cremate our body. We should bury our body normally. That's what I think. I don't know. I was told by Rabbi Coffin, Rabbi Miller, you don't cremate if at all possible.
So there actually is another reason for not doing it, because it says, from dust you were taken, and to dust you will return. And so the assumption is that just as we were naturally brought from the earth, we should return to the earth in that natural state as well. So that's been the explanation that I've always heard about, about this. But I think you're adding another explanation, Arlen. I think it all comes down to that general rubric as to who owns your body, and we treat our bodies, at least I think so many of us think that we own our bodies, but we don't. We
That's
don't.
right.
So
That's right. We do not own our body. God owns our body.
I would say so. Our creator, the,
Right.
the force that brought us into this world, in a
Now,
sense.
as far as the hair is concerned, I'm bald. I naturally so. Does
It's
God?
right. No, that's a different story. And you didn't do it on account of the dead. You didn't
Right.
do it as a mourning custom. Okay. So
Okay.
it puts it in that context too. Okay. I'm going
One
to
more thing. One
okay,
more.
sure.
We have on the fish, it's scales and fins for the fish,
Yes.
and for the birds, no bird of prey. You should, and also you should not eat a natural death. An animal that dies a
And
natural
that's in
death.
a different
Sell
place.
it to the foreigners,
Yes.
right?
That is in a different place. Yes. Birds, what happened was the rabbis look at the birds that are listed and determine certain common characteristics that they say are determining factors. So that's with the birds. Okay, I'm going to wish you a good day. Second.